Hey, beautiful people. Thanks for joining me today on Tea and Chocolate Productions. If you don't know me, I am Lauren Spaniolo. And today I am grateful to have Sue Dumais on the program. And Sue's website is Heart Led Living. We'll delve into her work. And today we're going to speak to Sue about her book, The Evolution of the Ego. And this is one of the things that she's written. She's written two other pieces. And I've known Sue for actually many years. So we've weaved in and out of each other's lives. So it's really lovely to see actually your evolution. And I loved this book. I highly recommend this book. And we'll delve into a little bit, but I thought you might want to introduce yourself to the audience, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. It's interesting when you say, oh, I actually have 6 books now, which is
Oh,
amazing.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I feel like there's probably another 2 or 3 coming in the next couple of years. So it's just
Oh,
like, I feel
awesome.
like there's the author in me is just, it's part of what I do in this world is create content and to share what messages come through me. So as a healer, as an empath, as, a minister, as a global impact visionary leader, I receive a lot of downloads. And the downloads end up in different ways. And the books just happen to be one of my favorite ways to create content for people. I'm really passionate about helping people get out of their heads, into their hearts, and really living with a sense of profound purpose, more of a soul knowing, deep, core, faithful purpose. And that's really why I'm here in this world. And it's an honor to be here with you. It's been so long since I've even been able to see you. So by video, it's great to see your face and
Yeah, thank
to
you.
connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to start off with something brilliant you've done in this book. And it just made me chuckle so much. And it was the letter that you wrote to your ego. I mean, it's brilliant. And so, because I heard myself, obviously, in this, we all can hear ourselves. And I'm just going to read a little, just really just like short little snippets of what you've written in here. And I would love for you to just expand on that once I'm, done. And this is just a piece here. You say, so this is an open letter to the ego that Sue has written, right? So she's got, you are a powerful teacher of fear and separation, and I have learned so much from having you as my mentor. I have no regret, only gratitude for all that you have brought to my life. You have taught me to fear everything, to question everything, to doubt everything, to regret most things. You have convinced me I am unworthy, undeserving, and unlovable. You have called me stupid, dumb, an idiot, useless, and many more names I don't care to repeat in this letter. You have been my greatest teacher of fear, and I have come to know fear deeply and intimately. I am writing to tell you enough is enough. So I think that's all I'll share there. But it's just, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That letter just came through immediately when I started writing that book. That was the first thing I wrote. And it was really, my intention was really to intimately thank the ego for everything it had taught me. And the writing the letter was really therapeutic for me. And even hearing you read it again, I was like, oh yeah, I'm reminded, because it's been years since I wrote that book, a couple of years since I wrote that book. And it's powerful for us to really honor fear and honor that part of ourselves that's afraid to play the part we're meant to play, to shine our light, to be the shining, brilliant beings that we are in this world, and to really honor what it is that we're meant to share. The ego is like an overprotective helicopter parent that just plays fear against us completely. And to be able to honor it, because we created it and we fed it along the way, and we continue to feed it in a lot of different ways, is such a statement for me that I'm not going to let fear hold me back anymore. I'm not going to let fear be the thing that keeps me from doing the work I'm meant to be doing in the world. So it was really powerful. It was a really powerful experience reading it.
What I got out of the book too is that sometimes when you're in the place of ego, right, and you know, we can define it as fear. Sometimes, yeah, it's hard to define it and see it as fear. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, because we're so tied up into it. So,
Yeah,
there's so much of our belief that's tied into like, well, that's who I am. I'm like, no, you are not the ego. You are not fear. And it's challenging because it's like, well, if I'm human, then I'm ego. And I'm like, I take it a little different. I take a different approach to that because I believe that we can be in a space where we can embrace our humanness, embrace this human classroom for healing and for awakening and for connecting with other people and remembering the truth of who we are.
right.
At the same time as embodying our divinity. I don't feel that they need to be separate, although we need to meet people and give them an understanding at that level because that's what our mind is programmed, and that's where our ego mind is based on separation. It's based on that duality. So to be able to understand, yes, we're human, and yes, we are divine beings, how do we create that bridge? And the one way to do that is to create an understanding of what role the ego really plays in our life, which is to embed fear.
Right. One of the things that popped up in my mind as I was reading the book is that our early development stages, and you did talk about your son in the book, that example that you used. And I had wondered, I thought, oh, okay, was she in tune at that time as a parent? And so if you could talk about the early stages of, you know, from the 0 conception to 7 years old, because I believe those are the years of development, and how the ego gets like developed at that point, or does it?
Well, the moment we come into physical form, there is an element of ego present because it's in that moment that we embrace our human mind. And our human mind is based on the understanding of duality,
Right,
love and fear.
right,
So we're instantly in the moment we kind of are conceived or given birth, we have an understanding of the ego. And then it develops and it's nurtured or fed
uh-huh.
by the fear of society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it expands. In that first 0 to 6, 0 to 7 years, we're looking at a mind that's just wide open, like a receptacle, just receiving. It has no filter, nothing developed yet at the level of the brain and the mind to be able to reject or accept things. It's just everything's downloaded. And it's just a big receptacle, like a big bowl. And people's opinions and judgments and fear and society's programming is all just like dumped in there over the years. So we're very influenced by those early years,
Right.
but we don't have to be limited our whole lives by that programming in those early years.
Mm-hmm. We have a collective fear, do we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you just talk about that a little bit? And maybe if you want to touch on, if you like, I know that you've touched a little bit on your book, but um, of particularly now, because it's quite heavy, with social media, the media, and the various things that have gone on in the world, and maybe how we can navigate those things, from a softer place rather than, you know, from our ego mind.
Yeah, well, definitely there's an individual experience of fear,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the collective fear of humanity.
Yes.
And that collective fear is confusing because a lot of times we mistake that collective fear for our individual fear.
Mm,
So when those two fears collide, they expand. If we can identify, okay, this is my fear and this is the collective fear, I may be
right.
contributing to it, but if we can understand that it's a little bit separate from us, then we're actually better equipped to process our own fear
Right.
and witness the fear in others, or witness the fear of the collective.
Right.
Now, the collective fear is also a series of inherited fear, as well as generational fear and familial fear. So it's like a big kind of hairy monster in itself. And the interesting thing is, after I wrote the book, the day my book launched, I identified another ego, which I didn't add in the book. When I do an update, I'll add it, but it's called the super ego.
The super ego?
Super ego, yeah.
Okay.
The super ego is the collective ego of all of humanity, staring you in the face. And I had a very real encounter with that ego on the day my book launched. That was quite an experience. But the super ego is basically the collective ego, the collective fear, magnified by about 1 million.
That's interesting. Is that going to be something that you can share right now, or we have to get the book?
Well, no, I don't know. I can share a piece of it. I've talked about it in my radio show, the difference between the spiritual ego and the super ego.
Yes.
But basically what we're looking at is, especially right now, what we're seeing is the super ego, like supercharged.
Okay.
Supercharged.
I think I know where you're going with this.
And the challenge with the super ego,
Yeah.
it's like everybody's fear all playing out into this big monster staring us in the face. And the challenge is, it's like really bringing up all of our deepest, darkest areas of shadow and aspects of ourselves that we've denied, or we're kind of don't want to see or don't want to admit that are part of us. It brings out that shadow. And that's what we're seeing is this super ego charged up, and then everybody's own version of their own ego being fed by it. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the backlash and the violence and the outbreaks and the fights, and we're seeing sides of people that we never saw before, and it's a bit shocking in some ways. That's the super ego at play.
Me too. I'm actually overwhelmed by, there's one area that I'm really quite passionate about, is the whole cancel culture, where we have this sort of idea or this entitlement by shaming people in public, or by saying, if you don't agree with this ideology, well, then you're less than, and you're not, these words of woke and all the rest of it. And that's not really my journey, right? But as a spiritual, practitioner, and I just, it's not like a separation in how I live my life. It's all inclusive. It's like, okay, well, I'm not perfect, but it's like, okay, well, how do I go about accepting people for their differences? Because what I'm seeing outside of me there, it's like, man, that doesn't jive. Even if I don't agree with you, right? Let's respect each other anyway. So I'm wondering, like, I see that as really disturbing. And I guess in terms of like the egoic state, that's part of a collective ego. And if you don't, like, I guess, latch on to that collective ego, then you might feel that there's something that you're not inclusive, right? You're not included into anything.
Well, the collective ego and the super ego, we can actually step back and witness it.
Okay.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
The challenge is it really bumps up against our own shadow, our own ego. So the real divine discernment there is, what is the super ego and what is mine? And then looking at what is yours,
right,
will empower you to make a different choice, to stand in love versus to stand in fear. Because if we meet the collective fear with our own fear, fear expands.
Right.
If we meet the collective fear with love, love expands every single time.
That's true.
So the choice is to step back, look at our own, honor our own pieces of it, our own triggers, our own shadows, our own fear, and then process that in a way that we can then meet the collective fear with love. And when we do that, it doesn't mean that what we look upon we agree with, but we don't need to judge it as right or wrong. That's the ego. The ego loves to judge things as right or wrong. It just is. This is what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And what's happening is a lot of stuff is rising to the surface, a lot of darkness, a lot of shadow, a lot of density. And that's the good news. It's coming to the surface and it's not hidden anymore. And people are outwardly showing those aspects of themselves that were hidden before. And as long as those things remained hidden, they couldn't be healed. So that's the good news. The challenging news as a human, having a human experience, I have deep empathy and compassion, and it's really hard for someone who feels so deeply like you to witness what's happening. But if we can actually step back a little bit from our human version or our human perspective and say, okay, you know, spirit, divine spirit, God, universe, whoever you pray to, show me another way to see this. Show me another perspective, because the one I'm holding is painful and hurtful and heavy. Show me another way to see this. Then we can actually start to have more of a global understanding of what's really going on and how this healing is occurring. Because as one area, one group of individuals heal, it triggers another group. And that trigger is actually good news. It's just if it's not processed properly, it becomes projection and attack and judgment. Mm-hmm. And that's where we really need to pull it all back to, okay, what part am I playing right now? Am I adding fear? Am I adding love? Am I witnessing through a lens of fear? Am I witnessing through a lens of love? It really becomes an opportunity to look within and do the healing work within ourselves. And then being willing to play the part you're meant to play the role you're meant to play. If anything, sometimes you're meant to stay quiet. I remember I had a blog or something I wrote was when to speak up, when to shut up. There's times when you're meant to speak up and speak your truth. And then there's other times you're meant to zip your mouth shut. You're not meant to say anything.
Right.
So the discernment in that, when you speak and when you don't speak, mm-hmm. comes from within the heart, not the head. What do I think I should do? Nope, that's not the question. So what am I guided to do? Or what am I guided not to do?
Right, right.
That's really where we can serve at the highest level.
Well, in that sense, that's where you're kind of playing with, you know, the ego within, where you're asking yourself, is it the time to be, you know, quiet or to speak? Because we're so reactive to things. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my God, I need to respond to that.
There's a difference between reacting and responding.
Well, this is true. This is true. But, you know, when you're, like you say, if you're emotionally invested, like many of us are at some point, or right now, sorry, at this moment, there's worry and anxiety attached to those things at the moment. Because
it doesn't have to be, though.
True, but I hear what you're saying loud and clear, Sue. But it's
I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like at times it's hard to get there, because you see the leaders of the world just behaving like, let's get this together, folks. Mm-hmm. Whether it's you know, the leaders of the world, or even within our family systems, our jobs, you know, it's layers upon layers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And most of us want the same thing, you know, but getting there, of course, is different in so many people's eyes. Yeah. So
and there's no right or wrong path either.
True.
You know, my path is the way of the heart, and for another person it may be a different path, and it doesn't mean that my path is right and theirs is wrong, or theirs is, you know, right and mine is wrong. It's just different. And this is probably one of the most challenging times.
Right.
Because there's so much. It's not just one piece.
Right.
There's a lot washing up all at once.
Yeah.
And we are being bombarded with opportunity after opportunity to make a different choice, to look within, to process our own pieces, and to speak when we're meant to speak and not speak when we're not meant to, because that's not serving. So I talk about it like it sounds like a simple thing to do. It's very challenging, but in some ways it is simple.
Yes.
It's not easy at all. Not easy at all.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think life is complex or simple?
It's very simple, and the ego makes it complex.
And the ego makes it complex.
It makes it complex and complicated and confusing and all the other, anything else it can do to keep us kind of playing small.
Yeah. Can we talk about some of the labels that you've created in the book here, and how we like self-criticize ourselves, and perhaps ways and how we can move out of these ego states? You've used the addiction of food. I love the way you describe the food and the illness pieces in there. Is very interesting. Whether we're getting angry at ourselves, self-judgment, and any of those, and getting caught up in that and bringing it back home to ourselves. So I'm wondering if you can give some tools about how many of us can, we can attach to whatever our thing is. And because ultimately we're talking about addiction in some ways, right? Because we all have a little bit of something.
Well, yeah, in a lot of ways, we're addicted to fear.
Yes.
We're addicted to the ego. We're addicted to the drama. We're addicted to trauma. There's so many different avenues that we can take around addiction. But yeah, ultimately it comes down to, we are programmed to be so invested in fear, like it's our best friend. And if we don't have it, then we're nothing without it. And that's just not true. But it's so deeply ingrained, like an addiction. And it's not as simple as I talk about, like, make a choice. In every moment we have the ability to choose. We can exercise our human will to choose love or fear in every moment. Sometimes that's going to be an easy choice, and sometimes it's going to feel impossible.
Yeah.
And we just have to honor that part of our human experience where it feels impossible. So one of my favorite tools to bring into people's awareness is the idea of resistance. And I talk about resistance in the way of, I define it as the gap between what your mind thinks and what your heart knows. The further away your mind is from your heart, the knowing in your heart, the bigger the gap. The bigger the gap, the more resistance. Resistance can show up as irritability, frustration, anger. It can show up as worry, fear, confusion, procrastination. It can show up as a busy signal when you phone somebody. I'm like, who gets a busy signal these days? It's usually a signal to stop and go, okay, am I meant to actually call this person right now? Where is this coming from? And it's like the universe kind of going, whoa, 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 stop for a sec, check in. So resistance is a finger pointing to something within yourself that you need to heal. Something within yourself that's not in alignment with the knowing in your heart. So I use resistance for everything I do. If I feel any glimmer or inkling, and I don't care if it's a tiny scratch of resistance or a big, huge, obvious slap in the face of resistance.
Okay. Resistance
is a key to open up and unlock that layer for healing, because it's basically pointing to your leftovers.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates for sure.
So it's an easy one to use, because you can feel resistance when you're sitting in the grocery store and it's taking longer, or the lineups where, the lineups now with all the distancing. Is that a real true lineup, or is that just social distancing lineup?
Right.
Long? And are you okay with it? Are you triggered by it? Are you feeling impatient? Are you feeling irritable? Are you feeling like are you getting angry? Those are opportunities to look within. Those are opportunities to look at, what am I really believing about what's happening right now?
Right.
And then the other piece to think about, and this is a quote from A Course in Miracles,
yes,
which is what my ministry training is based on. And it says, we're never upset for the reason we think.
Yeah, you've got that noted here. I love
that. Being think. Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah. We're never upset for the reason we think. So if you're standing in line and you're angry, are you really angry about the line? Are you really angry about the time, like what is it that's really underneath that? Chances are it's not just related to that situation. It's got some history to it, some past.
Right, right. Or getting cut off in your car or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything.
You've written here the 3 ways to living life: by default, by design, or by divine.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way you've broken it down, and it's very intentional, right? And this is where you were saying earlier about, making choices all the time, right? And if you could just, speak on that. And, one of the things that also that you've said in your book that I just love, I've highlighted, it kind of goes hand in hand, where you write, comparison crushes creativity. It makes you feel like nothing is ever good enough. So I feel that that's sort of in hand in living your life in divine purpose rather than, by divine rather than by default or by design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, life by default is where probably about 80% of the population
Yes.
is still living, which
Right.
is kind of asleep at the wheel, not really conscious, not really aware, kind of living in this space of like life's out to get me, or,
Right.
kind of a victim of circumstances, not much you can do about life. It just
Right.
is.
Right.
So that's life by default. Life by design is when we start to wake up and we start to realize, hey, I'm a little bit more in control than I realize. And I actually, my inner environment's actually influencing and impacting how my outer environment plays out. So we realize we're a little bit more like the captain of the ship, and we're actually steering in some ways, consciously or subconsciously, where we're going. And then life by divine is that shift out of your human kind of taking some kind of sense of control and surrendering completely to your divine self, the divinity within you to animate your life. So it's a beautiful surrender and allowing your life to be guided as opposed to directed by your human self. It's more of a guidance by your divine self. So those are the 3 ways, and that's actually from my book, Stand Up, Stand Out, Stand Strong.
Okay.
That's one of the chapters, and I pulled from that book and I added it to this book because I felt it was really important to understand, because where the ego really thrives is life by default. It like thrives there. It's got complete control. There's nobody else trying to grab the wheel. Life by design is when we as humans start to kind of grab the wheel and go, wait a minute, I don't need to be totally driven by fear. And maybe there's something more to this thing called life. And maybe I'm having a lot more influence. And I realize, and this is where people really start to get into the whole idea of law of attraction and law of vibration and that sort of thing. And they start to feel like, hey, I can manifest things here. I can make things happen in my humanness. My human self can do something with this. And then the ego gets a little threatened, and this is where it really starts to temper tantrum and freak out. Or get really clever and well hidden, right?
Yeah.
Then when we shift into life by divine, we're really surrendering our human will, which means we're completely surrendering our ego will in exchange for our divine will.
Okay.
It's like on a human level, I think I know what I need. I think I know what I'm meant to do, but it's limited. So I'm turning to you. Show me the way. Guide me, lead me in each moment. And then there's this spaciousness in the mind. So I don't have these conversations, well, like, what am I going to manifest? What am I going to create? It's just like, use me. What would you have me do? And then you become this vehicle or this messenger for the divine.
Right. It's getting into a place of feeling that you are in service for others in a way.
In service for others and of self.
Of self,
as well. We have to be included because we're part of that equation.
Certainly. And so when you, have done this, work with what we've described, the 3 ways of living, and just you outlining the ego traits, how do you come from, to a place of like forgiveness? Like, how do you get to those places, because those are, you know, we can be really hard on ourselves first and foremost, right? And we're just mirrors and reflections of often, you know, oftentimes I hear someone and I often hear myself and I'm like, you know, don't do that. And I imagine that takes years, or maybe, I don't know, but just a level of awareness and understanding that we also need, I guess, to forgive ourselves.
Well, yeah, I think the biggest challenge is forgiving self. I think it's easier to forgive others ultimately, even no matter what they did. It's easier to forgive others. It's harder to forgive ourselves. And don't get me wrong, there's times where it's really challenging to forgive others, but in comparison to forgiving self, sometimes it takes years, but but really what it is, why we forgive others is to free ourselves. Forgiveness is for us, right?
Is that, so, I know, but I hear that often. Isn't that, I don't know sometimes like how to actually do that, you know, because this person or individual or situation has legitimately made a conscious choice to feel like I've been harmed. So I don't want to go into a place of victimization, right? And we can easily do that because we're fed that narrative. You are a victim. This is what's happened to you, rather than for you, or maybe a little bit of both. And so, are you going to say something? Because go for it.
Yeah, there's a real divine practice that comes in when it comes to forgiveness.
Okay.
And it's important to honor the part of you that feels like a victim. We don't want to bypass that, but we don't want to camp out there at the same time.
For sure.
So we want to honor the hurt, honor the wound, honor the trauma, and witness it with loving compassion. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do for self. And at the same time, we could look upon the other, who you might consider the criminal or the person who caused the harm.
Yeah.
We can look upon them as well. And I don't want people to bypass the anger and even thoughts of revenge. They don't have to be actions of revenge, but thoughts of revenge are actually empowering and allows us to move out of those lower density emotional energies into the higher vibrational energy scale, right? So we want to move up the emotions, and part of it is going through anger and revenge. And then we can get into a place where, can we see that person's pain and their own hurt as what really kind of caused them to project or lash out? Yes. So that's one aspect. But really, when it comes down to forgiveness, the way I like to look at forgiveness, and I find it really helpful to do it this way, and this is part of what A Course in Miracles teaches as well, is forgiveness is our ability to forgive it over, to forgive it over to God, to the divine, to whatever it is you pray to help you heal. One, help me heal this. Help me see another perspective. Let me offer this over as a willingness to heal and to get past this. So forgiveness for me is about forgiving it over in order to free ourselves.
Right.
And it's not like we're giving it away and putting in it, like denying it. It's like move through the emotions, feel what you need to feel, get the support, because some trauma need compassionate witnesses. We need to move through trauma, in some instances, with a compassionate witness, someone who can hold our hand and walk us through it and help us out the other side. So there's a real opportunity in forgiveness, and not only to free ourselves, but to free others from the judgment or the anger or anything else we have.
Yeah, I'm also hearing you say, basically, if you agree or disagree, I don't know, but it's really the desire to be more emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about emotional intelligence, and that's where having awareness around our resistance. You know, how do I? This is what I'm thinking, because we can get clear about what we're thinking consciously. I'm like, there's a lot going on in the subconscious mind. That's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we can get clear about what we're thinking, but most people aren't taught to go to what they're feeling. So when I'm talking to people and they're in their story and they're telling me about what happened, I listen, because some people need a compassionate ear to hear and to listen so they feel heard. And then I ask them how they feel and where they feel it. I bring them into their body. Where do you feel it? What do you feel? What emotion is present? And that actually really helps unlock a lot of what's in the subconscious mind as well. Because when we're in that story, but what we think we know, what we think is making us upset, we get stuck in that. And then if we can get underneath it, the feeling is often, the emotion is often a key to open up another layer for them.
You've written, our ego is not the enemy, it is our greatest ally.
Yeah, it's here to teach us, and it's played its role brilliantly. It's actually done like a bang up job. It's like it gets an A+, it's teaching us all about fear, and it's given us so many opportunities, and it continues to try even when we become aware of it, and it evolves, because the more we have an awareness of what the ego's, what angle it's taking, the more it's going to evolve, because it has to get more and more clever until one day we just don't buy into fear anymore, and it has no choice but to dissolve in that moment. Doesn't mean it goes away completely, because it can show up in another instant if there's a trigger. But in those moments where fear is dissolved, where the ego is not present, there's a beautiful, profound peace. And sometimes those moments can actually last for days or months or years. And it's in those moments that I have deep gratitude still for the ego, even though it's not there anymore.
What do you think about the way our culture praises and validates certain things, and maybe they're in kind of hierarchical structures, or the way we praise celebrity, just because, a celebrity endorses it, or etc. It's like it's completely giving away our power in a lot of ways. And whether they're leaders of countries, you know what I'm talking about, do you? Like, just this idea that we've created this illusion that these people they have the answers.
Well, that's part of the spiritual ego, right? So the
Right.
spiritual ego will either inflate or deflate. The spiritual ego will either add kind of a superiority or an inferiority. So what you're talking about is like putting people on a pedestal. They know better than me, or they know better because of whatever it is. And that's spiritual ego. So a person can put themselves on a pedestal, and that's their spiritual ego puffing themselves up. I often talk about the peacock feather, how the peacock spreads its, that's the ego. I often feel this energy of a peacock feather spreading out its feathers and just like, strutting its stuff. That can be the spiritual ego. And when someone puts themselves up on a pedestal, and they're speaking all the right words, they're saying all the right words, but there's something feels off about it. Something feels like there's a niggling, or something just is odd. And if we get behind the energy of it, we can feel that puff up peacock feather superiority energy. Okay?
Yeah.
At the same time, we can go the other direction. So what's happening is people put, certain celebrities on pedestals, then they shrink themselves. So that's their spiritual ego deflating themselves. Or I don't know as much as they know. They know better than me. Or I need to trust them more than I trust myself, because this is what they told me to do. So when we put our faith in another human being, we're actually limiting ourselves. And our faith really can't be given to another human being. Even our trust can't be placed in another's hands. We really, the only place we can put our faith and our trust is in our divine self, our divine connection to our source. And that's where, when we offer that over and we are guided from there, we can witness the spiritual ego in others without judging it, very challenging, because in every moment we're either observing or judging. The mind instantly likes to judge. So we'll have an observation, it'll go right to judgment. So we have to stop that behavior. It's just a habit of the mind. When we can observe the spiritual ego in others, we can soften, and then we actually start to really deeply trust our own ability to tune in and our own ability to choose what's best for us in that moment. And then we kind of take our power back in that. And for me, it's a process, but we also have to understand that we cannot bypass that phase of evolution for the ego. We will all encounter our own spiritual ego one way or another. For some, it'll be less, and some it'll be magnificent and big and large and in charge. But either way, we need to witness our own spiritual ego, witness it in others without judgment, so that we can actually go, okay, I see you, there you are, I see the angle you're taking, and I'm not buying it. You can stay there. I'm not going to push you away. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to try. I'm just aware, because we can't really push and force the ego's evolution. It's just a natural process, and it's just going to have its own evolution based on our own awareness and our own experiences. So everybody's path is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But we're going to encounter the spiritual ego, guaranteed.
Right, right. I just have a few other questions, but before I sort of just bring it down, I just want to note this quote. We are taught to fear our true self, our true nature, our essence.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the way that you've articulated that.
Yeah.
I'd like to segue that. I don't know, we probably don't have a lot of time for it, but if you could just add maybe a few words. This, I'm coming to you from Vancouver, for those of you who don't know, Vancouver as in Canada. And in Vancouver, we have a major issue with homelessness and an opioid crisis. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that on the downtown east side, how I don't know, you know, each individual person has their story, and then there's a collective thing going on down there that's just not being healed. I'm wondering what if you have any thoughts on that?
Interesting, because as we're talking right now, the thing that's coming in is community.
Mm-hmm.
As much as we can look and judge
Yes.
that area,
Yes.
it's a community.
So true.
There's a sense of belonging.
Yes.
There's a sense of connection.
Mm-hmm.
They're seen, they're understood by each other.
Right.
And then they're judged by everyone else.
Yes. Very well.
So
yes. Absolutely.
What if the solution is to actually witness without judgment, to observe and be the compassionate witness, take inspired action when you're meant to, and meet them in their humanness. And when we meet them in their humanness, we can honor the struggle and the challenge and the pain and the addiction. And at the same time, we don't need to feed that. We don't need to enable them to stay there. But we can empower them by reminding them of their divinity. Now, not all of them are ready to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to meet them in their humanness and share what they need to hear. And what they need to hear is not always what we want to say, or it's not always what we think we should say. So we can't approach each individual in one recipe fits all approach.
Yes. Yeah.
But we really need to honor the pain that's brought them to that point, and at the same time honor the community that's maybe keeping them there too. Because if they don't have that sense of belonging anywhere else, why would they step out of it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any connection or correlation with the death of the ego and the death of our physical body?
Well, I don't talk about the death of the ego in the book. I talk about the dissolution, the dissolving of it.
Yes.
the dismantling and the dissolving of it.
Yes.
And even the idea of death in the world is kind of an ego belief, right? It's just like, do we really die? Do we just lay this body aside the same way some of our clothes is a little old? I gotta put this in, I wore this too long. It's got too many holes. Is there really a death? Is it just a transition and a transit? And the interesting thing is when we look at transition, it's more challenging for our spirit to come into physical form. It's actually more challenging to go from spirit to baby, physical baby, human baby. The transition from human back to spirit is actually easier. It's an easier transition. So I don't see death the same way a lot of people see death. And I invite a perspective in my own mind so that I can, so let me stop for a minute, because yesterday my dog went in to have a dental cleaning, and she's a 7-year-old Chihuahua.
Yeah.
She's a lap dog. She'd be on my lap, but right now I put her in her kennel because otherwise she'd be snoring on my lap while we do this. But she went in for a dental, and she's 7. She has a heart murmur. She's delicate. She's sensitive, So I had this moment where I was like, what if something happens to her? So in my humanness, I had that grief or that fear of loss. And instead of fearing that, I went into it. I closed my eyes. I went into my heart and I felt into it. And what that eventually led me to was a sense of grief, like a collective grief and loss for all animals everywhere.
Wow.
And I had tears. It was very powerful. I had a little bit of shaking in my body as the energy moved. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I was kind of supporting a release, collective release for some energy around loss and grief with animals, and just even some of the trauma and the abuse they've endured and still endure. And it was a really powerful release for me and for humanity. I feel like it was a gift of kind of letting it channel through me.
Right.
And so I honored the human part of me that was afraid of the death or losing.
Yeah.
And then I went to a deeper place and more of a divine kind of clearing for humanity. So that's the potential when we can open up our mind. If our mind is closed, if we think we know what it is, if we think we know, and that's why I love your questions and having this conversation, because it's opening people's mind to what if what I think is not really all there is, or what if it's not really totally true?
Yeah.
And it just opens up the mind, and a mind that's made up is a closed mind. So we want to create that wonderment and that curiosity because it keeps the mind open. And I think that's where my biggest gift has been, is being able to honor my humanness. And I talk about that in the book, is like embracing our humanness and embodying our divinity and recognizing that we can have both those experiences simultaneously without dishonoring one or the other.
Right.
And that's really what the work that I do, that's really what I'm passionate about, helping people get to.
Mm-hmm. You're also, the takeaway too from this book, there's so many, is also the ego getting in the way of the joy of living, right? The real joy of living. And I think that aligns with the living by divine. Yeah. Yes.
Life by divine is like joy and happiness naturally arise there.
Right.
For me, I don't have the joy and happiness, like that's not my default setting. That as a child, that was a very low temperature gauge for me, so I kept it really low and contained. But for me, life by divine is just like a divine content peace, like just a deep peace, knowing that everybody's taken care of, and I'm guided by something much bigger than my human self. Right. And that brings me great peace. So life by divine, we don't chase joy, we don't chase happiness, we don't chase peace. It's the side effect of living that way. And the more we experience that side effect, the more we realize that there's real miracles in continuing to move in that direction and practice the tools that allow us in our humanness to really embrace living that way.
Okay. Thank you for sharing all that.
Mm-hmm.
Today is December the 29th, 2020, and I'm acknowledging this date because reflecting back on the year, what has this year meant for you?
It has been, you know, I had this, I often wake up at 3 and 4 in the morning and I go into meditation and I'm just given all these different visions. And the vision I had last night was a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Mm. Good to know.
Yeah. And yeah. And there's actually a lot of healers right now that are talking about the whole, like right now is the time as we're moving into 2021, it's that time to, and we're at a choice point.
Mm-hmm.
We're at a beautiful soul choice point. We either rise or we revert.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I really feel like there's no right or wrong, and we all get to choose, and we don't judge anybody else's choice.
Yeah.
That's the work. That's
Okay.
the hard work.
Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, we'll try. But it's really about, what is the choice for you? What is the choice for you? Will you rise? Will you be that phoenix rising from the ashes, spreading your wings and going, okay, I'm ready. I'm willing. Show me the way. What would you have me do? I'm going to play my role as fully and wholly and completely as I possibly can.
Yeah.
That's our choice right now, to rise or we revert. And neither's right, neither's wrong, but we need to make the choice. So right now we're at a pivotal choice point. What do we do with 2020? Do we bless it?
Yes.
Bless the mess of it?
Yeah.
See the ashes as an opportunity to rise and spread our wings? How do you choose to see it?
Mm-hmm.
Up to you.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned of so many silver linings from friends and people that I don't know that have had such lovely things happen because of COVID. And these are the silver linings. And of course, the devastation that's come with that as well, and the losses and the griefs and all that. So that needs to be acknowledged, I think. So I just would like to say thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Yeah. And writing this book, I'm really grateful. It's really wonderful. And there's really, I've highlighted pieces where I can go back to, and, there's short little like nuggets and phrases, that you just, oh yeah, great, and they're so helpful.
Their fingers pointing to the truth within us, right? So anything that we find in the world that resonates becomes this finger pointing to the truth within us, and those are beautiful reminders.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well. Many blessings to you and your family.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll see you in Turks and Caicos.
Yeah,
that's not where Sue is, by the way, but that's part of the book.
Yes. I'm definitely home in BC, and I'm actually really like snuck in, cozy, like tucked in. And this last year has been a real time for me to go inward and do some really deep healing. And I've actually taken a step back from doing a lot of the work I was doing and simplified a lot of things. And that's been my theme, is keep it simple, Sue. And that's what it'll continue to be as I move into 2021. But
yeah,
I definitely have a lot of gratitude, and I'm just blessing everybody and honoring their challenges and honoring the trauma that they're still going through, and then recognizing that everybody right now is in this beautiful space of opportunity to do things differently. And sometimes we need the reset button. I feel like 2020 is a bit of a reset. And we'll see where we go.
Okay. Well, thanks so much again. And everyone, I hope that you've enjoyed today's segment, that you've taken so many good things from today's discussion with Sue. You can reach Sue at heartledliving.com, and you're welcome to leave any questions, and I can connect you with Sue. So I wish you all the best for the remainder of the year, which is just three more days. And thanks for those who tuned into Tea and Chocolate this year. And I'm wishing you well for the 2021, and that we come to some peace and understanding. So sending you lots of love, and thanks again for joining. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.